Mao Zedong, the revolutionary leader who transformed China into a communist state, was known for many things: his charisma, strategic thinking, and the brutal campaigns he led that changed the fabric of Chinese society. However, one of the more unusual and less discussed aspects of his life was his notoriously poor hygiene. While much of his life was carefully managed and presented to the public as an image of revolutionary fervor and moral uprightness, Mao's personal habits told a very different story. His neglect of basic hygiene, including his refusal to brush his teeth or bathe regularly, is one of the stranger and more unsettling details about his personal life. Mao Zedong had a very peculiar approach to dental care. While most people adhere to the basic routine of brushing their teeth daily, Mao believed that brushing was unnecessary. He famously refused to brush his teeth for most of his adult life. Instead, Mao developed an unusual ritual. He would rinse his mouth with tea after every meal, chewing on the tea leaves before spitting them out. He claimed that this practice was enough to maintain his oral hygiene. Mao's aides and doctors repeatedly urged him to brush his teeth, but he consistently ignored their advice, firmly believing that the tea rinsing routine was sufficient. As a result of this neglect, Mao's teeth were severely discolored and decayed. His teeth gradually turned green from the tea and plaque buildup, and he suffered from halitosis, chronic bad breath. Those who were close to him, such as his personal physician Dr. Li Jisui, noted the poor state of his dental health and the unbearable smell of his breath. However, Mao remained indifferent to these concerns. In his mind, his dental routine was tied to his belief in traditional remedies and his own stubbornness in resisting modern medical advice. Mao's dental habits were not the only area where he disregarded basic hygiene. He also rarely bathed, an unusual habit for someone who spent much of his life in the public eye. Throughout his leadership, Mao frequently refused to take baths or showers, often going for long periods without washing his body. According to those who worked closely with him, Mao would go weeks, sometimes months, without bathing. He showed little interest in maintaining cleanliness, and his unwashed body would emit a strong, unpleasant odor. When asked about his bathing habits, Mao had a strange and controversial response. He reportedly told his doctor and close confidants that he did not need to bathe because he washed himself in the bodies of his women. This remark referred to the fact that Mao had numerous sexual relationships with women throughout his life, especially in his later years when he surrounded himself with young women, often much younger than him. He believed that engaging in sexual activity would naturally cleanse him, rendering bathing unnecessary. While this belief was rooted in a personal and perhaps mystical view of sex and vitality, it was not based on any scientific understanding of hygiene. Mao's disregard for modern hygiene practices was also influenced by his deep belief in traditional Chinese medicine and practices. He had a general distrust of Western medicine and preferred traditional remedies that had been used in China for centuries. This extended to his views on cleanliness and health. Rather than adhering to modern practices like brushing teeth or bathing, Mao favored a more traditional approach, where he believed the body's natural state would take care of itself. His belief in natural balance and energy likely contributed to his casual attitude toward hygiene, as he saw no need to interfere with his body's natural processes. Despite his personal preferences, Mao's leadership was marked by strict discipline in other aspects of life, especially in how he controlled the lives of his followers and the Chinese population. His government implemented numerous policies aimed at improving public health and hygiene, including campaigns to eliminate disease and improve sanitation in cities and rural areas. However, Mao himself did not adhere to the same standards he expected from others, highlighting a striking contradiction between his public policies and private behavior. Mao's refusal to maintain basic hygiene did have consequences on his health, though he rarely acknowledged them. His poor dental hygiene, in particular, led to significant tooth decay and dental issues as he aged. Despite having access to the best medical care in China, Mao was resistant to receiving treatment for many of these problems, preferring to rely on traditional remedies or simply ignoring the discomfort. Mao's lack of personal cleanliness also affected those around him, particularly his inner circle of aides, doctors, and bodyguards. Many found his uncleanliness difficult to tolerate, but given his supreme authority, few dared to confront him directly. His doctor, Li Jisui, in his memoir, The Private Life of Chairman Mao, provided detailed accounts of Mao's daily life, including his unsanitary habits. Li and others close to Mao were responsible for managing his health, yet they had little influence over his personal choices, as Mao remained adamant in his resistance to changing his habits. While on the surface, Mao's hygiene habits might seem merely eccentric or unpleasant, they were also symbolic of deeper aspects of his personality and leadership style. Mao's refusal to bathe or brush his teeth was part of a larger pattern of rejecting modern practices and insisting on his own way of doing things. This stubbornness extended to his political leadership, where he often resisted advice or criticism, preferring to trust his own instincts and judgment, sometimes with catastrophic consequences, as seen in policies like the Great Leap Forward. Moreover, Mao's personal habits reflected his sense of invincibility. As the supreme leader of China, he did not feel the need to adhere to the same rules as everyone else. His position at the top of the political hierarchy allowed him to live according to his own standards, no matter how unorthodox or impractical they may have been. In some ways, his disregard for hygiene can be seen as an extension of the power he wielded, power that allowed him to do as he pleased without fear of challenge or consequence. Mao Zedong's questionable hygiene was a strange and often overlooked aspect of his life, yet it offers insight into his personality and the contradictions that marked his leadership. While he promoted strict discipline and control over the lives of others, he lived by his own rules, ignoring basic practices of cleanliness and health. His refusal to brush his teeth or bathe regularly was rooted in a combination of personal beliefs, traditional Chinese practices, and an almost defiant rejection of modern conventions. Ultimately, Mao's hygiene was more than just a personal quirk. It was emblematic of his complex and often contradictory nature as both a leader and an individual,